Rise of the Ronin got another look. They called this the World Vignette, where they're going to showcase what the world looks like and everything else like that. Let's take a look-see-poo, and then I'll share my thoughts on Rise of the Ronin and explain why I've pissed people off with what I've said about it.
Rated M for mature.
PlayStation. World. Traversal. Captured on PS5, okay. All console gameplay. The swimming, cool. Bakumatsu? They're just gonna show running around? Okay. So, I mean, where I'm at with this, I think the realization of concept art seems to have been there, but in movement, in action, there is something just a little bit weird about the game. The thing I've brought up multiple times is this like gliding thing. This is the coolest part that they've shown of the game. When I think of Rise of the Ronin and I'm trying to do like, what is it? What is that game? What makes it unique? What makes it stand out? The thing I've brought up before in the marketing world is the tip of the tongue test. Like, you know that you have a successful brand image when somebody, when it passes the tip of the tongue test. So, like if you go, the famous example is like, okay, British chef, always angry. You know what I'm talking about. You know exactly who I'm talking about just with that. Even if I do something as vague as, it's effing raw, you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly who I'm talking about because that's part of the brand. With this, I think you could also be like, game set in Japan, big glider. And people probably know what you're talking about. People can probably piece this together. I don't know why more of the marketing hasn't centered around this. Well, actually, I think I do. But this is far and away the most iconic and interesting thing about the game that I've seen is this glider. And yet, when we see it in action, it's actually more underwhelming. Potential reasons they might not focus on it because they want it to be about the combat, not necessarily about the gliding. Maybe the gliding is like a smaller element of the game, only really usable in cities. Maybe that's part of the reason why. There's a lot of reasons. I think it's because
Trainer D donated $5 through Super Chat.
I'll follow
Rise of the Ronin looks unfortunately underwhelming in so many ways. So much tiling going on in those washed out textures.
Yeah, to me, well, I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to that. Thank you for the super chat. Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. I'll finish with the glider. For me, I think the glider looks really cool, but the reason that they are not focusing on it so much in the marketing is because they want it to be more about the gameplay and the combat specifically. And because I think when you see this in movement and motion, it doesn't actually look that cool anymore. Like, look at this big sweeping shot. When he jumps up with the glider, it slows down immediately. Look at that. Do you see how fast it was going initially? And then it just slows to a crawl. And that to me suggests like data streaming stuff where they can't actually let the player move that fast through the world without excessive pop-in and issues like that. So they slow you down physically so you can't actually travel through the world that quickly. A similar thing has been present in like Bethesda games. I was talking to a modder actually who worked a lot on Fallout 4, and one of the goals that this modder had for Fallout 4, I was going to turn it into a video. I don't think it quite worked for that. But maybe we'll do that eventually. But anyway, he was working on vehicles within Fallout 4, trying to get a mod that would basically give you a motorcycle to travel the vast expanses with. And what he found was that it just was not really possible with the engine without major overhauls and things that were just frankly beyond his capability to do. So they kind of abandoned the project. Because basically what would happen when you started traveling too quickly is all sorts of things like AI and animation timings would break, and then also stuff wouldn't load in properly. And it just caused everything to collapse slowly but surely when you started letting the player character, travel too quickly through the map. Because they had built the engine around you basically walking on foot or running on foot, with everything else assuming that speed. So, oh, we don't have to load in this stuff over here in the top of the map over there, because we have all of this time, actual time, when you're running and walking that way, for us to unload this stuff and load in this stuff over here. When you allow the player to just quickly zip over with a glider or with like a magical teleportation thing or whatever, you lose that time. And so it doesn't work anywhere near as well. And that seems to be what's going on here, because again, he goes from moving pretty quickly to probably the same speed as when you're sprinting. See? Little weird. So there's other things I've noticed, like you'll see it right here on the bridge. This is something I've seen in like Monster Hunter on the PS4 and on the Switch, but not this close. There's a thing that happens in some games where, to save on memory and computational resources, they will have the animation resolution or frame rate past a certain point, or even quarter it. So past a certain threshold of maybe 20 meters, every model past that spawned in will have their animations play out at half speed. Not half speed, at half the resolution. So if it was a 30 FPS animation, basically, it now will go at 15 frames. And you can see this with these guys walking. Just watch them. Oh, wait. They were quick with it. Let me rewind. I'll stay zoomed in here. You'll see them in a second. You see that? It's very quick. Blink and you'll miss it. But you see, I'm moving forward at 1 frame at a time. They move. Another frame, they don't 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 move. Now they move, sort of physically forward on this next frame. They move a little. They don't move. 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 Now they move again. So there are multiple frames where they're just not moving, because that's how they save computational resources. And if they go in here and they're doing this in these trailers and it's visible, this is where the game looks its absolute best. And it makes me worried for where the game looks its worst. Worst. Because if this is where the game is at its best and they're still like, some of these things are sneaking into the trailer, it just concerns me. Because in 2024, I would have thought we were past this point. If you're going to give us an open world, I think if there's characters that are this plainly visible to the player, they shouldn't be moving at such a low resolution as you walk forward. I mean, other studios like From Software, even Ubisoft, for over a decade, have been able to manage having NPCs this close to you without having to drop the frame rate so much. There are 4 characters on screen. If you can't manage to have these guys running at and walking at full resolution, it worries me. So when you do an open world game, that type of thing jumps out at me because it affects immersion. And if you don't think it does, then what are we doing? Like, okay. If you're able to go tunnel vision. Oh, sorry. There are 5 characters on the screen. 5 characters. You're right. 5 characters. I missed the guy by his hand. So that's jarring. I think that does pull a lot of people out in terms of immersion. When there's characters that close that are moving like that, it pulls you out. There's also, in previous clips, I've shown a lot of pop-in and issues that I'm hoping they fix before launch, but we're quickly approaching launch, and it seems like these issues are still here. Beyond that, this team is very, very capable of putting in some amazing combat encounters. I don't know what's going on with this. There are so many fingers. What the hell? This is like, whoa. Oh God. Look at that ghosting. That's not even ghosting. That's like, that's crazy. This is like Jesus with the loaves and fish. It's just multiplying. Jesus. So to me, it looks like they're probably using like an upscaler on the fur to make it look better. So they render the fur at a really low resolution, then maybe they upscale it, and then there's like some ghosting artifacts from FSR or whatever technology they're using for it. But it looks like real crap. I mean, come on. It looks real crappy. And granted, you're not playing a game like this, and you're not playing games from this studio for the graphical fidelity. You never really have. You're playing it for the combat, but this stuff is jarring. This stuff does stand out. I mean, if I'm playing a game and I get to this sequence, for one, the hair already looks pretty rough for 2024 full price, for full price game in 2024. But then we go and like we have this much artifacting and ghosting. It's just very jarring. And I think if you're going to charge like AAA prices, you got to deliver AAA quality at the end of the day. Especially when other studios have been able to put forward stuff on the same hardware that has performed way better and looks way better. So it just concerns me. But this is where the game excels. Like this combat is where the game is going to be made or broken. Like you can have all those graphical issues, and if the combat's great, it's still an 8 out of 10. You know, the game can have all sorts of problems in cutscenes, a terrible narrative, any of that other stuff. But if the combat's really good, it's still an 8 out of 10, and I think the core fan base is going to find it enjoyable. But it just worries me that we've seen this game a lot at this point, and there are still concerns over data streaming, over pop-in, ghosting, like a lot of graphical and technical issues with frame rates bouncing all over the place. And we're getting close to launch, and the issues have not fix themselves, and they're showing those issues very clearly and kind of in full transparency in trailers like with this. And that just makes me think that either they don't see the problem or they're just acknowledging that it's not going to change, and it's just like, nope, this is what it is, and so get over it. Which, okay, I respect it. I respect you showing the game as it actually is. But to me, this jumps out and is a little jarring. And so I'm going to call it out if I see it. And does this mean the game is going to be bad? No. It does worry me what they consider to be tolerable as far as ghosting, artifacting, graphical issues, things like that. And then when we see other things like those guys on the bridge with the really slow animations and stuff, that worries me for exploring the map and the world itself. It just makes me wonder, like, again, what their tolerance is for this type of thing. Because it doesn't seem to be that low. It seems like they have a very high tolerance for pop-in, stuttery animations, frame drops, ghosting, stuff like that. Other moments like this, the glider seems to be moving much... I mean, it's still moving very, very slowly. Like, really strangely slowly. Am I the only one that thinks it's moving really slowly? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. Feels like for a glider, it's crawling. Like, I thought Breath of the Wild did a really good job of matching that speed with what feels good and is controllable, and what also makes sense as you're falling through the sky with a glider. But with this glider, it just comes off as really restrained. Because again, like, if it were, I'm not saying everything has to be realistic, but you would expect the point of a glider is to travel quickly. So you like kind of zip and glide through very quickly. I don't think they can do that because we've seen signs of other data streaming and issues like that. It also seems to be capped in terms of max speed to what the players like NPC or the player characters running speed is. It's the same thing where like, I timed this out in Starfield where people were saying, no, in Starfield, you don't need vehicles because you can get a boost pack, a jetpack basically, that allows you to jump and blast through the air to travel faster. And what I found was it doesn't actually change your forward momentum at all. If you're running at 10 miles an hour at a full sprint, you will still move 10 miles an hour forward. If you're using your jump pack in that game, it'll just move you up. And they might distort the screen a little with like the air blasting past you to make you feel like you're moving faster. But if you actually set up like in Starfield and you say, okay, I'm going to start counting the timer like right as I go through this threshold of this archway. And then I'm going to see how long it takes me to reach the water and reach this rock in the water. And you time just sprinting it, and then you time it while using your jetpack and boosting along and blasting as you go along. You will reach the rock at the same amount of time. It just made you feel like you were going faster because you were moving up and down. And it's because they can't actually allow the player to move faster because it's an engine issue. It can't actually stream data in fast enough to let you do that. So with this, it makes me wonder if something similar is happening where they have the speed of like the player sprinting, and then you go a little bit faster when you're like on a horse, and the glider just goes at that max speed, the max speed of the horse, which is a lot slower than it should be for a glider, but is the same as if you're on a horse because that's the max speed they can allow you to travel. But I mean, again, the combat is where this game will be made or broken. If the combat is like then it drops to like 7 to 6 out of 10 range. But if the combat's good, it's probably more like an 8 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10. But these major technical issues that they're showcasing pretty proudly in their trailers, that type of thing gets your game knocked down a peg or two during the review process. Like, come on, look at this. The clip is so quick, blink and you'll miss it. But you better believe when you're playing the game, you're going to notice this stuff. And people are like, oh, Luke, you're just pixel peeping. They give me half a second of this shot. So it's easy to like glance over it and not look at it. But come on, dude, look at this. Look at this. Okay, so let me zoom in here just so it's clearer and so chat's not blocking it. Watch these guys walking. Frame forward, frame forward. They still haven't moved. Frame forward, still haven't moved. Frame forward. Now he moves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frames. So he's staying still for 5 frames, moving on the 6th frame. And again, it's blink and you'll miss it during the trailer because it's such a short clip. But when you're playing the game and there's a character 20 yards in front of you and they're running and moving at 10 FPS. I'm pointing this out because when you play the game, you're going to notice it. In these trailers where like they clip it together within like a half-second cut of this shot and then a half-second shot here, you might miss it. And you just kind of look at the character in the tree and then it moves to the next shot and you won't notice this other stuff. But my frustration is like, if you're going to put this in, you have to meet a certain standard of quality. And if you fail to meet that level of quality, you shouldn't be upset when people call you out for it. If I go and I offer in my game, like say I'm developing a game and then I announce that, hey, we have basically a nemesis system. It's a system where you fight enemy characters that are dynamically generated, and then you create dynamic relationships with them as you kill them and they kill you. They remember everything you did. It's basically a nemesis system. Everybody's like, ooh, awesome. Love that. And then you play the game and it turns out that actually there isn't really a nemesis system. What I put in my game is way worse than what my competitors have put in the game. And you're like, okay, well, if you just hadn't told me there was a nemesis system in here, and if you hadn't pitched it, I couldn't have been that upset at its absence. But because you put it in here and you framed it as being present and you tried to put it in, I'm going to critique it and say how much worse this is than the other versions of it we've gotten. In the same way, like if you present the game graphically in this way with a more grounded, realistic art style, I'm going to call out that like characters' feet aren't touching the ground and are floating. This is like, correct me if I'm wrong, this is a full price game, right? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is a full price game. Is it not? Feet touching the ground has been a standard, dare I say, in video games for a while. And yet we are running into this issue even here. So we have 10 FPS animations and characters floating. Like, and pop in and things like that. So it just starts to worry me. Now, it could be the case that when you play this game, you spend a total of 20 minutes in the city and you don't actually spend that much time in here. Most of the time is spent outside in combat where the game excels. That's fine. The game could still end up being good and worth your time even with these issues, because most of these issues that we're seeing are present in cities where NPCs are. I think that's probably because these guys have not typically done games with big cities with NPCs walking around, so this is new for them. And so naturally there are some growing pains that you're witnessing, but that's not my fault. Like that's not my fault. Okay. Yeah, if you play Neo 1 and Neo 2, it's all about the gameplay and Team Ninja's games. Yeah, but this, like, they've chosen to go big open world with whole cities of NPCs walking around. And like I said, when you put yourself out there and you try to put a feature in a game, you're going to be held to that standard, especially when it's full price. Because when it's full price, I now get to compare your game to other full-priced games on the market that are doing similar things way better. The game could still be worth checking out. Maybe not at full price. Maybe, you know, only if you really, really love the combat. But it's crazy because Neo 1 looked better than this. Well, to me, this suggests that maybe they bit off more than they could chew by giving us big cities and stuff. And that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting with a lot of it. Is the glider is a cool concept. I love the glider. It moves way too slow. And if you're going to give me a whole city and it's not populated until you get really close and then everybody pops in, like maybe we shouldn't have done a big city. Maybe we should have done something a little more narrow. Like the moment you expand your scope, you have to rise to that level and expectation. Because you put a city in here, guess what? Now I can compare this game to freaking Assassin's Creed 3, which had cities of similar size and scale, and honestly, in some cases, might have even looked better graphically from a decade ago. I get to hold you to that standard, and you're charging full price in 2024. So it's just, if you're going to do something, you have to do it to the quality level expected of the price you're charging. And in this case, the more I look at it, the more I see a flood of potential hiccups. I see red flags. I see red flags. And I'm sure on the stream clip for this, there will be people who are very excited for this game that are upset that I'm pointing these things out, or that maybe they just honestly don't care about these things, and that's fine. My goal is to bring these things to your attention because in the trailers, you might not spot them, but when you're playing the game, you better damn believe you're gonna notice this stuff. He took my thing. Red flag.